This is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have with us on WZRD two candidates for Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. First is Frank Avila, who served on the Water Reclamation District from 2002 to 2020. And Sharon, you have also a great background on engineering and water engineering, as does Frank. So welcome. What are the main issues facing the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago now?
Sharon,
I'm just going to defer to Frank going first.
Okay.
Yes. That sounds good.
I think the main issues facing the Water Reclamation District are several things. One is maintenance of our wastewater plants. We have 7 wastewater plants, and we have to make sure that they're operating properly. So we have to make sure that we maintain the wastewater plants. We have several reservoirs throughout the county. We had about 30 or more reservoirs, and we have to make sure that they're being maintained properly also. And then we have the deep tunnel. We have the 560 miles of interceptor source. So the main thing for us to operate at the level that we want to do to protect the health and welfare of the people, we have to make sure that they're maintained. That's one issue that we're facing. The other issue is that there's this new chemical out there. It's several chemicals. It's called PFAS. And the government is going to set limits on the amount of PFAS that could come into the wastewater plants. And the problem with that is that if the district ever has a large amount of PFAS coming into our system, that will be in our biosolids. And if we have a large amount of PFAS in our biosolids, we cannot distribute that to the farmers and to the golf courses, and we'll have to take that to the landfill. That's the biggest discussion going on now. Sharon, would you agree on that, Sharon?
I think that you did a great job, Frank. So PFAS is actually a huge issue for the water industry, and this is what's pushing a lot of drinking water utilities to hook up to Lake Michigan water. So the smaller systems that maybe use groundwater, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is definitely going to come around to wastewater as well. And also just maintenance projects. It's human nature to want to fund the flashy new fancy project, but we desperately need to maintain our older infrastructure.
Could you spell PFAS for us? This is new to me.
Polyfluoroalkyl substances. It's a large class of long chain hydrocarbons, including C8, which is the DuPont non-stick chemical that everyone might be most familiar with. It's the coating in the non-stick pans from DuPont.
It's spelled, so the acronym is spelled PFAS?
No,
S.
S.
Yeah, perfluoroalkyl or alkyl substances, PFAS.
Okay.
And they're very hard to degrade, and they cycle in the atmosphere. So they're finding them in polar bears in the Arctic.
Yes, and it involves about 5,000 different types of chemicals.
Well, that makes sense, but that they're hard to degrade because evidently they won't degrade in heat. So this problem has been accumulating. When did the PFAS problem first come to light?
Oh, ever since manufacturers been manufacturing products. I could go over 30 years, for 40 years. It's the type of chemicals that they use to make products, ranging from clothes to household products there.
So right around 2000, the first time I became aware of it was groundwater contamination in West Virginia near the DuPont factory. So right at the Ohio-West Virginia border. And I actually started doing the research to try to degrade the perfluorooctanoic acid in my PhD work, and concluded that there was no economically feasible way to do it for biological treatment. So the best treatment is super expensive and wasteful right now.
So does that mean that the biosolids that were filtered out from the wastewater that we had, in the previous years and up to now currently, PFAS is contained in all the biosolids that have been filtered out and then sold to farmers' fields? The thing is that we're trying to separate out the PFAS, but as for the previous biosolids, all those biosolids contained PFAS, right?
Well, only they did testing at the district, and they found very low amount of PFAS, or hardly any PFAS. It's just coming out now, and as I mentioned, the problem that if we start getting PFAS in our biosolids, we cannot distribute that to the farmers or to golf courses or residential people. So we have to make sure that we don't have any PFAS coming into our biosolids. No.
Are we using?
I'm not sure that that's going to be possible, but MWRD is in compliance with state regulations. I just think that the regulations for the state are evolving.
Does that mean that we are using more PFAS now that we have to address this issue? Is PFAS still allowed for products now?
Well,
Yeah, it's only starting to be regulated in drinking water. Sorry, Frank, I keep interrupting.
No, it's okay. So, but PFAS we have to have a prevention system, and the only way to prevent it is that have our manufacturers eliminate some of the PFAS chemicals when they make the product. It's
absolutely.
Yeah.
Source control.
Yes.
And just a little bit of insight as to how does it affect humans, the PFAS?
That's kind of unknown. So there's been studies done, but a lot have been done on animal models. So this is kind of part of the controversy that's going on in the drinking water community right now. A lot of people feel that the health data is maybe not as rigorous as we would like to see. But then do you really want humans to be the guinea pig? So this is a healthy discussion going on right now at American Water Works Association Illinois chapter.
Is there a lot of research going on as to the effects of PFAS on humans?
That I don't know. That's the medical industry, but they're probably doing some research on it. I would assume.
Research or discussion. There's definitely desktop research. Are people being dosed? Probably not.
As to maintenance of Metropolitan Water District, Reclamation District facilities, what kind of maintenance is involved there, and how much does it cost? Do we have enough money?
Well, when I left the board, I appropriated $100 million for maintenance on our plants. We have 7 wastewater plants, and so over 10 years, I set aside a program of $100 million to do the maintenance on our plants. You have concrete deterioration we have to take care of. We have improvements on our reservoirs we have to take care of. A lot of roofs we have to take care of. A lot of inside repair work needs on our plants, and we have to maintain the plants because our mission, the mission at the district, is to protect the health and welfare of the people. And the only way that we could accomplish that is make sure that our facilities are operating properly.
How likely are the reservoirs to break or crack or fracture? How long are they supposed to last? Like maybe the deep tunnel reservoirs, or there are many other reservoirs there as well, of course.
There's over 30 detention reservoirs, small reservoirs throughout the Cook County. Yeah. And also on the deep tunnel is completed. It's 109 miles long, ranges from 9 feet to 30 feet in diameter. It holds about 2.3 billion gallons of water when it rains. But the problem is that when we have 1 inch of rain in the county, one inch of rain, that's 15 billion gallons. So if you have 2 inches, that's double. If you have 3 inches, that double. So the problem that we've been facing on the rain is that it's the intensity of the rain that comes down in certain areas. So if we have, like the north side, if we have an intensity of rain coming down and we have over 3 inches, it's hard to solve the problem of flooding because of the intensity so much, because the ground will be saturated with water, and then it stays up on top. Would you agree on that, Sharon?
Oh yeah, I do agree. So trying to anticipate what kind of intensity is going to be coming our way with climate change. But the way we estimate that is hindcasting, which may not necessarily be the most relevant for the future as we move forward into climate change. So I think that we're going to have to start focusing more on water quality, so that the flood waters, you know, in our old combined sewer system, New York is doing some great things. So they actually are moving towards reuse in the buildings that border their water system, their rivers. And this makes a lot of sense to me. So if you can't necessarily harness Mother Nature, you can at least clean up your part of it, right?
What is the difference between reuse and reclamation?
Well, reclamation is what the district, what their name is right now. I think that they were foresighted to rename themselves from a wastewater treatment agency to a water reclamation agency, because it gets us starting to think about water as a resource. But reuse should be part of that. So there's 34 states that have reuse policy, meaning that the water reclamation plants can resell gray water to industry at a minimum. We are not allowed to do that in the state of Illinois because we don't have that policy. So for instance, when Stickney, Coppers right next to Stickney wanted to purchase gray water for their paint water operations, they were denied because of economics. So we lost the opportunity to remove pollution discharge into our environment with that. So that's a public health lose for us, as well as a revenue lose for MWRD.
Yeah, because when Sharon mentioned economics, each suburb they get their water from the city of Chicago. That's a water filtration plant off the Navy Pier, and then they sell it to the municipalities, and the municipalities sell it to their residents in their area. And so what the district wanted to do is provide our effluent to the copper company, but the village would have lost the revenue of selling the water to the copper company. Is that correct, Sharon?
Yeah, so they purchase water from City of Chicago, and then they mark that up and sell it to copper. So they would have lost that markup, which they depend on their operating budget.
Yeah. Yes.
So for comparison, Louisiana has a super simple reuse policy that just says, if you have access to gray water, you're obliged to hook up and you may not squander the precious water resources of the state. If Illinois had that super simple policy, we would be reusing water at Coppers from Stickney right now and gaining or I should say, reducing the pollution discharge to our environment.
And then also the Ford company on the south side wanted to use our effluent also, but we just going to make out the
economics
operation
again.
Yes.
And
yes.
you can imagine that this industrial wastewater flow adds to the base flow of our sewers. So there would be some positive impact of reducing that base flow to the sewers to add more capacity for the big rains when they come.
Right now, let's just clarify, after all the water is filtered, and we learn now that you don't sell it, we never even considered that you would be selling it. How is it used and where does that water go?
Discharged to the rivers, which go down to the Gulf of Mexico dead zone. And we've actually, the state of Illinois has been sued for the Gulf of Mexico dead zone. We're one of 12 states that have been sued. We're also one of 16 states without water reuse policy. And the overlap between those two sets of states is great.
Yeah, the problem that we have here is that we have, they could pinpoint the wastewater plants. It's a direct source. And so they'll pinpoint the, and when we treat pee and poop, we call that effluent. And then they could know where it's coming from as a direct source from the wastewater plants. But as you move along down toward the Gulf of Mexico, you have farm, and that's the indirect source, and they don't know the amount of coming into the Missouri River. So when we discharge the effluent from up here in Cook County, the effluent is discharged into our channel. From our channel, it goes into the Plains River. From the Plains River, it goes into the Illinois River. And from the Illinois River, it goes into Mississippi, always down to the Gulf of Mexico. And we have a dead zone down there that's probably larger than the state of Louisiana. A lot, and they blame that all from Chicago, that we're polluting all down to the Gulf of Mexico. So,
Well, plus 11 other states as well. So
Yeah.
we are in company with others, but we have a phosphorus reduction goal of 25% by 2020. And we're not going to get there without a village. Frank is completely right. We need the farmers on board. We also need golf courses on board. We need phosphate reduced quantity fertilizer for residential applications. Like, everybody needs to be on board with this, meeting these goals. And incidentally, it's kind of the best kept secret for the public. As I'm out here talking about it on the streets, nobody knows about this. But we've been doing, IEPA has been doing biannual reports since 2015 on it. You can check that out on the Illinois EPA website.
and also there's been a lot of research planting vegetation along the banks, though, as the as water runs off, it flows through the different plants, and they want the plant to reduce the amount of nutrients going into the waterways. So this is a big research going on. If they could find biological type of process to remove the water along the banks, I mean, it'll solve a lot of problems there.
What Frank is saying is being done in other states as part of another policy. So water quality trading credits could be implemented in kind of a banking approach, similar to what we do for wetlands. And what we also do for the new flood management ordinance from MWRD. So this is being implemented. Probably the most successful program near us is Iowa. Pennsylvania also has a program. Montana has a program. And this would provide opportunities for farmers to take advantage of a paid opportunity to plant wetlands kinds of plants on their ditches to absorb the phosphorus, and then maybe harvest them at the end of the season and compost them up into their fields so that it doesn't release back into the waterways. These are the kind of, I will say, state novel. They're not novel nationally, they're just novel in our state. This is the kind of stuff that we need to start considering if we're going to meet these goals and be good stewards. You know, this is climate change. The water's warming, the algae's growing, phosphorus is needed for life. It's part of our DNA. But when you put the increased water temperature together with our contribution from our wastewater treatment plants, from farmers, from lawns and golf courses, we're going to have to change.
How are they?
And also, I'd like to mention, we're talking about water, is that the problem we have here up in the north is that when it snows and there's ice on the roads, we put a lot of salt on our roads, and that runoff, all that chlorine, all that salt goes into our waterways. We have to set up another policy how to distribute the salt on our roads and not put a large amount of salt there on the roads. What do you think about that, Sharon? On the salt?
Well, that's different from the Gulf of Mexico dead zone. So just
right.
be clear, we're changing topics now.
Yeah.
Salt is really hard to treat. It's not going to be treated by our conventional wastewater treatment system. I agree with that. And other states, again, do different things. You know, they don't use salt in the water scarce areas. So Colorado doesn't use salt. I think we might have additional challenges with how cold our winters get, but this is, you know, another issue that needs policy. So the takeaway, talking to two engineers, right? We have the technology to address a lot of this stuff, maybe even all of this stuff to some degree, but we need the policy to let us do it.
Yeah, because water is, you know, our body is 61% of water. Water is life, and water is precious. So we have to learn how to use water and reuse water.
And we do. There is already de facto reuse, whether you'd like to admit it or not. So there's, as I go to my water conferences, the big topic right now is big pipe projects hooking up to Lake Michigan. We have a 30-mile project going in to Joliet, and we've got a 23-mile project to Waukesha, Wisconsin, just north across the border to Wisconsin. And that is a reuse project because of the Great Lakes Compact. They're hooking into Milwaukee, and they're taking Great Lakes water, they're using it, they're treating it, and they're putting it back to a river that flows into the Great Lakes. So that is reuse. And it would be called reuse if it was in one of the 34 states that had reuse policy. So it would be great if in Illinois, we could just call it what it is. It's reuse.
when the southern states sue Illinois for the effluent that they claim that we discharge, how are they able to tell which is Illinois and which is the other states?
I I I don't think they can't tell. It's just the amount of testing that they do when we discharge our effluent to determine how much nutrients are in our effluent on the discharge. Yeah, there.
So I have to brag on my 14-year-old daughter. We did a science, she did a science project. She only wanted to do Mississippi River water, but we found all the gauge stations. I helped her pull down the data, which took days. We found all the gauge stations along the Mississippi River from the headwaters in Minnesota all the way down to the where it exits into the Gulf of Mexico and Louisiana. And where you have not so much coming from Minnesota, and then as soon as the Illinois River hits the Mississippi, there is a giant plug. And I thought, wow, this is citizen science, a 14-year-old doing a science fair project. And it is so obvious that Illinois is a huge contributor, half.
So all the anything that is reclaimed, such as the phosphorus and any biosolids, etc., that is the only thing that those are the only materials that are being reclaimed. All the other water is just flows down to the Mississippi through. So what we use from Lake Michigan does not go back to Lake Michigan at all then.
That's correct. Over 100 years ago, they reversed the flow of the Chicago River. And the reason why they did that is because when the river used to flow into Lake Michigan, all the waste used to go in Lake Michigan, and the intake for intake of the drinking water was near the shore, so they were drinking their own waste. Mm-hmm. So they decided to reverse the river over 100 years ago. So it does not go into Lake Michigan. No.
So what will it take to remove more of the contaminants from the effluent so that the effluent would be drinking quality? Is it possible?
For sure.
Yes, possible. Yeah.
Yeah, there's these 34 states that have water reuse policy. California just passed draft guidelines to both recharge aquifers. That was a feasibility project, ended in 2012, I believe, and they are just passing log reduction value credits for how big. It's not a matter of it's how much treatment is required. So they have what's considered log removal credits or log reduction values. And so if you have, it's basically too much information, but it's based on pathogens. And so if you can demonstrate that your technology reduces, so like 2 logs would be 99%, 3 logs would be 99.9%. And if you can add all these up, they need like 20 log reduction. But if you can do that as long as you know what you need. And of course, this depends on the quality of the water too. So down in Texas, there was a drought in 2012 to 2014 that affected all the way from Minnesota to Texas. Wichita Falls, Texas, which I got to work with on a reuse project. When they had a big drought, they built an advanced treatment facility. They plugged their wastewater treatment plant into the advanced treatment plant, into their drinking water treatment plant, and they served that to the public. And the mayor went on the press saying, now you get to drink your beer twice. Probably not the best marketing plan. And they didn't, but they were in an emergency. So when the floods then came, they just disconnected that. And now that is available for them for the next drought. That's the way Texas deals with their reuse policy on a very ad hoc site-by-site basis. But this same drought affected everyone from Minnesota down to Texas. It affected Illinois too. And we had jobs furloughed, industry shut down in the Decatur area, mid-state. because they weren't really allowed to reuse the water. So they had big tank truckers coming in to deliver water to places like car washes. So it would be awesome if we could help our industry adapt to climate change, or at least not prevent them from adapting to climate change by allowing them to reuse the water.
Yeah, we're living in God's country. In God's country, we got Lake Michigan. And so the people here in our area, we do not think of reuse water because of Lake Michigan. Now, we have our north side plant, which on the last treatment of the effluent is the last treatment is Sharon, my mind went blank, on the north side plant, ultraviolet. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay, on the last treatment on the ultraviolet is that water is probably treated well enough maybe to drink there on the north side plant because E. coli is way down on after treatment. So maybe a little more treatment would be good. We'll solve that problem.
You need to pass the policy and determine the log reduction values. Certainly, I like to look at Arizona's guidance. California's a good guidance too. They've determined their log reduction values. I would not recommend that O'Brien is good enough to drink, but it's well on the way. It has disinfection. So basically, if you take the conventional treatment and you do nutrient reduction, you're well on the way to a better quality product that you could at least sell to industry. If you add additionally disinfection, you're further along the way towards potable, but not at potable.
Right. After the treatment of ultraviolet, the E. coli is way down.
Right. I love UV. It's an advanced oxidation. That's what I got my master's degree in. So not UV specifically. I got my master's in ozone. But yeah, it's a great technology.
And then on the south side plant, they chlorinate on the last stage. And the only problem with that is that they have to have tanks to bring in the chlorination. Have the tanks there, and that's a little more expensive also. But they're that's what they're doing on the south side there on the last stage there.
So on the whole, it is economically feasible to treat the water further so that it is almost potable, and then we could have more uses for it instead of having it flow down through the Mississippi River.
Yeah, and the problem is that we're living here as I mentioned, in God's country. We have Lake Michigan, and so no one is concerned about reuse water. Very few people here are concerned about reuse water because of Lake Michigan, because we haven't had the problem that they have in the other states here.
But as for there are areas that do need the water, and then if there is piping and to transfer this water to areas that need it, would that be feasible?
Yeah, there's the Joliet project is 30-mile pipeline, and the Waukesha is 23. I think the reason to do reuse in this region is to reduce pollution discharge to the environment and to not block industry that wants to reuse the water. So in the instance of Ford Motor Company, they have a sustainable development goal of zero potable water for manufacturing. That's their global goal. A lot of other manufacturers have global goals. So there's data centers coming in. There's one in Franklin Park, Digital Realty. They sponsor the water reuse conference. It's a international conference. And they are not allowed to reuse water in Chicago, in Franklin Park, in the Cook County region, because of our lack of policy. So they're kind of champing at the bit. They'd love to, they seek to be green for public relations, but yet we are standing in their way.
And also, here, the Great Lakes, we have 95% of all the surface water up here in the Midwest here in the Chicagoland area. 95, I'm talking about surface water because of the Great Lakes up here.
What does it take to change the policy so that this water can be reused? And is it worth the pursuing, and would you pursue it?
Well, climate change, yes. You go, Frank.
I'll answer that. That's a very interesting question. I think what it takes to reverse the policy and introduce these types of policies is to elect people that understand this type of policy so they could be in the position to inform the other elected officials about this type of policy. And that's why I like Sharon Waller. Sharon Waller wants to change this type of policy here in the state. And I would recommend everyone out there that's listening to the station to give her a vote for a water reclamation district of Greater Chicago. Sharon.
Thank you, Frank. You're very generous. I'm going to give a shout out to you too, because anybody that come to this is a little bit of an evangelism moment. There is climate change coming. Climate change is real. And science has become political. So the solution is to elect engineers and scientists. So I also don't think it's going to take an act of the state legislature. And frankly, they're not going to get, state reps and senators are not going to get elected for water policy in Illinois, at least not in the Chicago region. So I think it is the job of the commissioners of MWRD to work with the state legislature to educate them. It's going to take a boatload of public education. But honestly, the people who travel a lot or have moved from other areas get it. They get it more than the rest of us. I grew up here, but I've had an international career. And I had the good fortune of working on international projects and including for the state of California to determine if direct potable reuse is feasible. The answer is yes, it does. But these are what have informed my thinking. And when I worked on that project, I just thought, aha, this is why I became an environmental engineer, to find that narrow line that is pro-business and pro-environment. It's great when you see it.
Yeah, the mission of the district is to protect the health and welfare of the public, to protect our water supply, Lake Michigan, and our waterways, and to prevent flooding. Now, how does the district does all this here? It does it. It has 7 wastewater plants here in Cook County to protect the health and welfare of the people, and the 7 wastewater plants were designed and built by civil engineers. Also, on the flooding portion, we had the deep tunnel, we had the reservoirs designed and built by civil engineers. Every infrastructure that's involved in running the operation of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District are engineering type of projects. And that's why I encourage engineers to start running for office, because they have the knowledge and to learn how to protect the health and welfare of the public there. And that's why I'm glad that Sharon is on board.
Speaking of the business of educating the public about the better policy for reuse, we also have with us right now Bill Morton, president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, and he has worked with the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District in the past to help educate the public about water policy. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you so much, Wizard. I just want to say hello to Sharon Waller and Frank Avila Sr. I got to say, it takes an engineer to do a job like this. And environmental engineers and civil engineers are more than qualified for this position. I would not vote for someone who was not an engineer, because this is our water, this is our health. If we're going to trust the system and the work of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, we have to have people with experience and people who really care, but mostly experience and that are engineers. So as president of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce, I would like to formally endorse Frank Avila Sr. and Sharon Waller in their election campaigns. And you have the full support of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce throughout your campaign. I really love the work that Frank Avila has done. We've done it with him before, and I know that his choice of a running mate with Sharon is a good one, because he's a very smart man and he's got the experience and the talent, the skill that's needed to get the job done.
Thank you very much, Bill. I appreciate your endorsement. Thank you. Because, you know, water is life. Water is precious. Our body is like 65% of water. We need water to live. You know, everyone talks about health and they all talk about protein. Well, protein is only about 8-9% of our body. We got to consider water because water is 65% of our body. Water is precious.
Thank you, Bill. And I just want to also mention that how we plan for climate change is the foremost social justice issue of our time. So I don't think once you realize that we are a significant contributor to the Gulf of Mexico dead zone, it requires action and change on our parts. And so part of my public education piece, because as an engineer, it looks a little different to run for office. I have to do everything in a public education venue. So there was a movie that came out in 2020, Brave Blue World. I'm sure Frank knows it because the water industry highly supported this movie. We were tasked with then bringing it to our friends and neighbors. It's a great movie with narrated by Liam Neeson and also featuring Matt Damon and Jaden Smith. The message is there's a global water crisis, but the good news is we can adapt. We have the technology to adapt, but we need policy. That's my campaign, kind of in a nutshell. I could definitely fill in some details about how that reflects on our region, but it is very uplifting. So I showed that free to the public, paid for my campaign, by my campaign at the Davis on May 10th. We're showing it again June 7th at the Skokie Theater. It's on Eventbrite. You can search Waller #4 water. And I just want to spread the message that, you know, we have the technology to address the Gulf of Mexico dead zone. That is the most visible feature to show us that climate change is real right now. And I can show you my 14-year-old science fair project to show you that we're a significant contributor.
Also, we also talk about air pollution. Well, a lot of people don't realize at the district, we are giving away 100,000 oak samplings. Now, why are we giving away the oak samplings? Because when the trees are growing, it absorbs the CO2. Your vegetation, our biosolids, when they give to the farmers, we get better nutrients, and also it absorbs the CO2. So the district has been absorbing the CO2 for a long time. Don't forget now, at the district, we started the Deep Tunnel Project before the Clean Water Act. There, I don't know if a lot of people knew about that, but we were thinking before the Clean Water Act how to solve this type of flooding here in Cook County. Yeah.
How feasible, how much of water could we actually reuse and not discharge as effluent? What is feasibly possible if you were able to change the policy? Could we actually reuse all the effluent?
We cannot use all of the effluent because the problem that we have is when we discharge the effluent into our channels, we have to maintain a certain level in our channels for the barges to come through. And also we intake water from Lake Michigan to maintain that level. But surely we could maintain an awful, at the Stickney plant, it's a 1.2 billion gallons of effluent. So we could maintain a good portion of that for reuse. We have to watch out how to maintain the depth of the level in our channels. And also that's one of the considerations we have to do also. But we could reuse a lot of the effluent also. Sharon, what's your opinion on that?
I like your answer, Frank. So navigation is definitely consideration. That was the very first 100 years ago kind of precursor to environmental regulation, was more focused on navigation. I think that the baby steps forward for our state is just to not stand in the way of our industry that wants to reuse water either for sustainable development goals or also for climate change adaptation. Because reused water is an alternative water source for resilience in the face of climate change.
And
so I'm sorry. Oh, for resilience. So it's an alternative water source. So California talks about a water portfolio. You don't get water just from one source. So our industry could be using reuse water for, washing operations, for cooling systems. So back in 2014, down in Decatur, ADM there were 4,000 Illinois jobs put at risk due to their drought. So in a previous drought, they had the foresight to put in some cooling ponds. So they were able to continue operation at reduced capacity. But you can imagine these are Illinois jobs. And isn't it tragic if we have to furlough jobs because of lack of water? So other industries in the area did have to shut down, or they were faced with choices of having to truck in water. We don't hear about that in Cook County. We're a little blinded by this big body of water that you can't see across, to the point where we don't even, pay attention to what's going on to the south of I-80. But it's a big state. And if you go outside of Cook County, there's still a lot of municipalities on groundwater, and groundwater is depleting. And if you go and talk to Illinois State Water Survey, they will tell you they're concerned for the livelihood of our businesses. We are in a place where we can become a huge economy with climate change just due to our water resources. Much like 100 years ago, we were a center for transportation with the railroads. The future is going to be water, and the water is here. So we need to intentionally manage it to grow our blue economy.
And Frank, you mentioned 1.2 billion gallons of effluent. Is that per year?
That's on a wet weather day. On a dry weather flow, maybe it's about 500,000 gallons a day. There.
Okay.
So it depends on the amount of rain that's coming down in that area.
Mm-hmm. And then also you mentioned that policy is standing in the way. Is it that elected officials are not prioritizing this better water policy of reuse? Or is it that there is an industry or some lobbyists that are actually trying to prevent this from happening?
Sharon, you might have a better.
Takes public education. Yes.
Yeah.
I talked to the Department of Public Health. I talked to my 3 water professional organizations. Illinois Department of Public Health tells me, Sharon, nobody thinks this is a bad idea. We all think this is a great idea. It's just that nobody shows up for it when they talk about it at the Department of Public Health. We need to revise our primary drinking water standards, and we also need to provide tools for our industry to adapt. It's not going to just be reuse, and that's just one tool in the toolbox. So I've done 2 things. So I formed the Water Pack to endorse state reps and senators that are willing to talk to me about reuse, among 2 other issues, lead service lines being one of them. That's not an MWRD issue, but I am a water engineer and a total water engineer. So that's my issue. The other thing is I'm trying to form the Illinois section of the Water Reuse Association. So MWRD is already an agency. They're already a member. So we need 4 more. And if we can form this entity, then this would be a natural voice to lobby. I don't want to say lobby, to promote water policy to our state legislatures. But it's just like any grassroots organization. Our elected officials need to see that there's support for it. And there can't be support without public education. So I guess this brings me back to my June 7th movie, Brave Blue World. If you don't want to go, it's on Netflix. You can watch it on Netflix. But really, it's a great introduction to this.
I think Sharon hit the key word, education. How do you educate the public? That's the key. And maybe on education, maybe we should start that in grammar school. Start educating the kids on policy.
When Sharon, when you mentioned that the depletion of groundwater, if we were to reuse a lot of this effluent, how much of that depletion could we address? Is it reversible at all, or is it just that the water would be piped in for use instead of groundwater, or can it actually replenish groundwater?
Well, the area of Joliet, unfortunately, the geology is such that it's going to take a long time for that aquifer to recharge. We spent 100 years drawing that aquifer down. And the lack of policy means that new industry can come in and plant another well and continue to draw that down. If we let our industry recharge and then wait maybe 50 years, maybe they could start using that aquifer for potable reasons again. But it's going to take time. I think the other thing is that it's not necessarily cost effective to be considering reuse for aquifer recharge. That's the old school way that we thought about 20 years ago. If you look at Orange County, California, and the reason is pumping costs. You treat the water to potable standards, you pump it down to the aquifer, you let it sit there for 90 days, and then you pump it back up again. If you do direct or indirect potable reuse, you're saving all those pumping costs. The other thing is that in these engineered systems, you're actually getting a potable water quality product. And then when you put it out into the environment, the quality actually degrades. But in our public perception mind, we trust things that come from nature more. And so people feel more comfortable putting it down in the aquifer for 90 days and then bringing it back up regardless of that cost. But we have more control over it if we keep it so where we can see it and monitor it regularly, and then make sure that that quality is suitable. And we also have cost savings. But that's what the coasts are doing. I don't expect that to happen soon here.
And Orange County, their effluent, they're using their effluents for their potable water also in Orange County.
How far away from our effluent quality is it from their effluent quality? Any ideas about that?
Right now, we just do conventional activated sludge. So that's just we're just trying, the focus is removing total suspended solids and biological oxygen demand, biochemical oxygen demand. So that is just the very first baby step. So in the US, it's also required by law that you send all water through a permitted drinking water treatment plant. So regardless of whether it's needed or not, it needs to go through that plant. So you'd have to take the conventional wastewater treatment operation, put that through an advanced treatment operation, and then put it through a permitted drinking water facility. So really the bulk of the treatment is going to happen in that new advanced treatment process. And these are going to have chemical reactions like oxidation. They're probably going to have some more particulate removal. Some of them are membrane based, so they can get very pure waters like reverse osmosis, but then you have a problem with the discharge stream. So probably the better solution for this area is something like what happens at Lake County. Their drinking water treatment facility is biologically activated carbon. And this is also what's going in Georgia too.
When the lead in the water, how is that addressed? Is that filtered out, or is that the lead still in the effluent?
Well, you're combining the wastewater industry with the water filtration industry. We're separate. Here in Chicago, we have the wastewater agency, which is water reclamation district, and then you got the water filtration plant, which is separate. And the water filtration plant provides all the potable water, and that's where the lead lines come in there.
Yeah, well, I just thought that the wastewater also contains lead, and we were wondering whether that lead is also filtered out through that water reclamation process.
Well, probably to a certain point, because the water that we use in our house comes through the lead lines, and we don't find much lead in our treating the wastewater coming into our system. It's a problem that coming into the potable water site there.
I would imagine with the wastewater, you would find all kinds of things, not just, like pills and like cleaning agents and the dead pet goldfish. Everybody's putting things down the toilet. So what kind of things do you find?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because when we treat human waste, our wastewater plants are not designed to remove pharmaceuticals. And that's a problem we have. How do you remove pharmaceuticals from our wastewater plants? Well, the only way I found is prevention. Keep people happy, healthy, and let them have less prescription drugs at the intake, because our plants were not designed to remove all of these type of chemicals. Sharon, what's your take on that, Sharon?
No, this is the first step. So California, like San Diego, they have drug take back programs. We have one now that was passed by Cook County code. So you see that. I've seen it on advertised on buses. I would love to see it on big billboards for the ad council, because really source control is the way to go. It's just too expensive to add treatment to address some of these chemicals. So if we could just all collect our pharmaceuticals and then bring them, at least in Chicago, they have take back boxes at the police stations. So I always have I put them up on my windowsill by my sink in my kitchen until I get a good amount. And then I just take a walk over to the police station to drop them in the box. And this is the kind of programs that are precursors to potable reuse. So to work with the industry to make sure that they are cleaning their discharge as much as possible, that the public is well educated about how to minimize, non-essential things going down your drains. So we have fish. We don't flush our fish anymore. We bury our fish in our garden, following the old Native American, plant a fish and a seed at the same time that I learned from my kids' kindergarten, actually preschool. So, it's again, what is best practice? How do we get that information out? It's the schools is the best entry point. I find the little kids so engaged in the water cycle. I had a conversation maybe last month, and they, the dad was like, oh, water reuse and all this is not needed for our area. And I turned to the college age son and I'm like, or actually, I think it was high school. I said, have you learned about climate change? And he goes, well, not as much as you would think. So, but I think that some schools are doing a good job. It's public education. And where do you start? You start from the youngins. So it's their world. They will inherit what we leave behind. So we are just borrowing this land and their future from them. Wouldn't it be great if we could return a good product to them?
Sharon, I agree. Kids will save the planet, and that's where we have to educate, and we have to prevention is that we have to educate the kids and the adults how to stay healthy, and how to use less pharmaceuticals, and that's why I changed to be a vegan. I eat all organic food, and also now look, spring is here. I mean, summer's coming, and everyone is going to work on their lawn. Now, what do they go out and buy for their lawn for weeds? What do they buy? They buy what? Weed killer. And what compounds are in the weed killer? Not only do they kill the weeds, but the ingredients that they put on their lawn may harm their kids, their dogs, and themselves. So that's why we should educate people on how to take care of the lawns also. I mean, big problem we have now.
Yeah, so I'd like to challenge everyone listening to check out your fertilizers. And next time you're at Home Depot, see if you can find a low phosphorus fertilizer. I don't think it's that easy to find. And my kids, we've got a service project going on in the summer and car wash fundraisers. And to try to find a phosphate-free car wash is not trivial. I'm on all the bottles, looking down the ingredients, trying to find a phosphate-free car wash. Now, definitely the best practice is to go to an actual car wash facility where they can collect the water, but we have to be real with what people are going to do. And in the midst of trying to reach 25% reduction phosphorus by 2025, it seems to me that there should just be a greater public knowledge and more availability of low phosphorus, retail products.
And because phosphorus, but it's going to be depleted not very long.
Good point. Yeah, we talk about it being a limited resource, but yet it's a placement issue. We've got too much in some places and not enough in others. And it is a valuable product that could be sold. So Stickney, I think, is only a portion of the capacity. They only reclaim phosphorus from a portion of their wastewater flows. There is an RFP out, a request for proposal out to add phosphorus removal at Calumet, which is great. That is the one right next to Ford Motor Company, and they want to do reuse. It's part of their sustainable development goals. So that improves that water quality and maybe takes a tiny step forward to allowing Ford Motor Company to reuse that water.
It seems as if phosphorus is only mined in Morocco, and everything else is what is out in the field right now, what is out in the market. So if you were to reclaim the phosphorus, how much of the need could you satisfy that the farmers need, so that there's less pressure on the mined phosphorus from Morocco?
Well, that's a tough question to answer. The phosphorus is going to be depleted. I forgot how many years, maybe 30, 40 years from now. And that's why at the Stickney plant, they're making, they're recovering phosphorus, and they're making these pellets, little small pellets to give back. But the amount of phosphorus that they're recovering is a small amount that they're doing. And they're having problems with that plant. The plant is a Astera plant. And they're having a little problem because Stickney plant is so large that the Astera plant works well in a smaller type of plant. But at the Stickney plant, it's the largest plant in the world, but they're still recovering the phosphorus. So that's a hard question to answer there. How much phosphorus can we recover to get to the farmers? Sharon?
Yeah, I think that question is for an economist, but my economist friend, who I trust well, the rumor just back of the envelope is that we would not be limited by the amount that we could sell. Like if they could reclaim as much as they can, all of that has a market. So, and that could diversify the revenue stream of MWRD. So even if you don't care about climate change, you don't care about water and the environment, perhaps you care about your taxes. So diversifying MWRD's revenue stream so that they can sell product resources such as phosphorus and industrial wastewater as a start, then these help keep our taxes down.
And then on the effluent, summertime is coming, and they have to water down the roads instead of going to hydrant. They could maybe hook up to the plant and take the effluent, fill up their tanks on the truck, and go and water down the construction sites there.
And that's an appropriate use for the effluent. It's okay that water is clean enough for construction sites, is what you're saying.
And also the lawns too.
Mm-hmm.
The water is clean enough for because it has the nutrients in there also. So you can use it for your lawns. There.
This is where policy comes in. It shouldn't just be an ad hoc situation. So at the same time, the drinking water side is concerned with Legionella, especially in cooling systems. This needs to be an intentional practice. So we can't just, ad hoc start watering lawns with reuse. It's also against our current state law. So, but one story that I came across while collecting my signatures was folks who work for Shed Aquarium wanted to water their lawn with their aquarium water, which would be high in nutrients. It would be great for reducing fertilizer application and also reusing their water. They were not allowed to do that because of our lack of policy, which is another one of those kind of ridiculous stories that should be made public. We should be made aware of that in the public.
Lack of policy means that there aren't any rules to regulate the use of that water. It doesn't mean that there are already guidelines as to that water being too contaminated for use.
No, not quite. So in some cases, and probably a lot of cases, so the Illinois Department of Public Health has to err on the side of conservatism. So if there's no law, if there's no guidance specifically allowing it, maybe sometimes they disallow it. But for the example of Joliet, when they did their feasibility study looking at alternative water sources, they did consider the Des Plaines River. The Des Plaines River is a big body of water, and it sits right on their public hall, or their where all the public meetings were. It took me like 15 seconds to cross that bridge in my car going 50 miles an hour or whatever the speed limit is. And they were not allowed to use it because Illinois EPA said it was equivalent to raw sewage.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is the combined sewer overflows of Chicago. So in our primary drinking water standards, it says that you may not recycle raw sewage. So these standards were written in the 1950s before we had water treatment. At least not what we have today, and not the materials that we have today. So these codes and standards were written as if, you know, we just have to take the water in raw form and use it. And that's no longer the case. We're running into this in many areas. So like the lead service line rules were also written with the 10 state standards in mind that were written 50 years ago and didn't take into consideration the newer materials. Happily, the Department of Public Health has just changed that. So now we can start reducing the time and the ease of replacing our lead service lines, but that's a new event. So I think that the Department of Public Health is right to be conservative. They're right to have the long game in mind. It's just a little bit of a growing pains, trying to figure out how to get to where we should be for future public health with the rules and the policies that we have today. For sure, things are going to have to change. So that recycling of raw sewage clause in our primary drinking water standards needs some kind of clarification based on what? No treatment. We can definitely learn from what other states have done to implement that. So I think Arizona had the same kind of code before they modified their policy.
And when Sharon mentioned about combined sewer overflow, what that means is that when we have intense rain coming down and people are using their washing and flushing their toilet, is that the sewer gets overflow. I mean, the sewer cannot handle the rainwater and the human waste, so it overflows into our waterways. But now with the deep tunnel and the reservoirs, we have very few combined sewer overflows now because of what we're doing here in Cook County.
So with our population density in our Chicago city grid in particular, they're tearing down the single family homes. They're building up these massive, condos and whatnot. It's getting, in Rogers Park in our 2.43 square miles, our population density is like, 62 to 63, maybe more thousand people. It's crazy. So with that, our sewer intake on the streets, with all this concrete and paved and whatnot, I know that you guys have a program for green roofs, for water barrels, and for permeable surfaces. Can you tell me a little bit more about that and how that actually would assist in things not overflowing?
Before you answer, this is WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. And we have at WZRD via Zoom, candidates for Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago, Sharon Waller, Frank Avila Sr., and we also have with us Bill Morton, President of the Rogers Park Chamber of Commerce. Yes, go ahead.
Bill, what they're talking about is green infrastructure and gray infrastructure, and we have to promote more green infrastructure to help us in the climate change. But the problem that we're facing is that, especially we're on the north side in the 49th ward and the 50th ward, everything is all built up. You have less green infrastructure in those areas, and everything is paved. So when we have an intense rain in those areas, as I mentioned, 1 inch in Cook County is 15 billion gallons of water. So if you have 1 or 2 inches or 3 inches in the area in the 49th ward or 50 ward, you're going to have the storm overflows there because of all the pavement. So they have to maybe implement more green roofs, more educate the homeowners that have lawns there in their area, how to make little swales of plants to absorb the water. But with the intense rain, the groundwater is saturated faster, and then everything stays to the surface, and then it goes into the sewers, and it may cause a storm overflow there. Sharon, that's a hard problem. What Bill just said. How do you solve the flooding problem and implement green infrastructure in those type of areas? There are green roofs. So what else do you think on the lawns, Sharon?
I really think this is a tool bag approach. You just need multiple things for people to be able to kind of pick and choose what works for in their property. I'm in Chicago on a postage stamp property. We did have enough lawn to disconnect our. I tried a couple things. The rain garden was actually the thing that worked. The barrels, they look good, but they also overflow, and they don't make friends with your neighbors when they overflow. I want to give a shout out to Uncommon Ground, which is a restaurant in right next door to Rogers Park in Edgewater. So I am also a Girl Scout co-leader, and I was the Lego robotics coach for about 4 years. And as part of that, we do an innovation project. And one year they did something about, handling the green rooftops. They have an awesome example there, and it's kind of operated as a demonstration facility. So I think it only produces some like less than 20% of the greens that they use in the restaurant, but it's a start. These kinds of things, we shouldn't give up on these things just because they don't do 100% of what we want them to do. It's going to take a lot of different things. And I think that that restaurant made it through the pandemic. So I encourage everybody to frequent their business, to support them, and to spread the word about what good works our local merchants, restaurants are doing to make some kind of change. I also find that the brewers are on board, so they know water. And I've been doing, I was able to do a brewing for conservation event with Urban Brew Labs just in, I think it's the Lincoln Square. So it's a little bit farther south from you, Bill, but they get it. They get that water is critical. And they also have colleagues south of I-80, they're on groundwater, and they hear their trials and tribulations about their water quality and how much they need to treat their groundwater before they can even brew with it. So, our businesses see the challenge. Also, the brewers use a ton of water and they pay those city water rates. So if there was something that they could do to reduce the costs of cooling water, that would be, that would improve their bottom line. So, this is, other states have this. This is not new stuff. I'm not talking about anything that's novel. It's just not here yet.
Also, Bill, you mentioned they're building a lot of high rises up on the 49th, 50th ward. Well, maybe these buildings should have their own treatment facilities in their own building there. It could be a small plant, and every time they flush their toilet, it goes into their treatment. And then from their treatment, they could use that water for other uses. What do you think about that, Sharon? I think in other countries, that's what they're doing.
I think that they're using that in India. It's not going to happen anytime soon here, but it's excellent to look at the gold standard and then to scale that back to what's practical for your application. So that is being done. So I think in India, there was a big water shortage, and then the tankers that were bringing water into the city went on strike. And so people literally did not have water. So one apartment complex started doing rain capture and reusing all their water. So an on-site treatment system. So this is the more sustainable way to manage our water, more in smaller batches on site, less pumping costs, not big pipes. But yet in Illinois, in the Midwest, we're still building 30-mile pipelines, 23-mile pipelines, and transporting it 30 miles. It's not particularly visionary.
Well, how about like, what are your thoughts on permeable parks, parking lots, permeable sidewalks, so that there's less water going into our sewage system?
For sure, it's needed. And Lombard is a good example for a green alley program that has worked. It does require vacuum trucks because you have to suck the leaves out of the permeable pavers so they don't get compacted down and just as impermeable as concrete. But these are all things that we can learn again, and these could be good paying jobs. And Evanston, I think, has a green alley program too. The green alleys here in Chicago, we had a demonstration pilot program, I think, under Rahm Emanuel, and then it kind of stopped. They are more expensive, but I've taken a tour around the green alleys in my ward, and they're beautiful, perhaps too beautiful, meaning that they're too expensive to implement. So we don't necessarily need to build to the gold standard. My alley is just asphalt, and it's all kind of craggy and potholed, and it also is pitched directly into our backyard, so our backyards flood all the time. And so when you're talking about a life cycle cost, perhaps it is more economically justifiable to go with green alleys. We need to slow our water down and keep it on site as much as we can.
And also, yeah, also, Bill, the problem that we have to maintain what we're doing on these type of projects also. And that's where the problem occurs, that when we start the project and maybe the first 2 years, the people that are involved in these type of projects are around to maintain it. But as years go by, you have to educate other peoples to keep on maintaining these type of projects. Yeah. And that's why we have to start educating in schools our kids to showing how to maintain these type of projects. And it's an ongoing thing. Education is going to be the key, is how to maintain these green infrastructure projects. Yeah.
Well, we have done a lot of education over here for our listeners about water reclamation and preserving the environment through water, better stewardship of water. There still is a lot to talk about. However, maybe we could have another interview in the near future. Meanwhile, we wish to thank Sharon Waller and Frank Avila, Senior, candidates for Metropolitan Water Reclamation District of Greater Chicago. And we wish to thank Bill Morton, President of the Rogers Parks Chamber of Commerce, for joining us on WZRD today. And we wish you a very, wish you luck in implementing and gaining office and implementing this policy that will help our community in the long run.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Be safe.